I want to take the opportunity on this introduction of the second part of the work we are doing in chapter 8 of Why the Church, Divine in the Church, to relaunch and summarize the work that we've done to date. As you may remember, a month and a half ago, I left you with the question that Davide Prosperi had put before us at the beginning day. How can we help each other to live the awareness of dependence? The past few weeks, attending School of Community and listening to much of the feedback regarding the work that we've done, it became clear to me that the word dependence is not an easy one for us. To depend, to obey, to yield, to follow, to belong are words that somehow we identify with a denial or a nullification of our freedom. And therefore, quickly enough, we find them profoundly inhuman. The first part of today's introduction, I want to delve into these aspects, which coincides with the work that we've done during the School of Community in this past month and a half. In the first part of the year's School of Community, in the first part of the chapter 8, we, through visiting and revisiting the dogmas and the statements of the church, the tradition, the magisterium, we've been put before the fact that the ultimate meaning of our existence and the ultimate meaning of history, what we call the truth, is communicated to us with clarity and certainty. As we remember of what we read about the life of the Trinity, we come to understand that I never say the word I so intensely as when I perceive the unity of my identity with the same passion as I say you. It's memory of the words that Davide Prosperi said at the very beginning of the beginning day. Life becomes useful when it becomes obedience. Ultimately, this obedience is an openness to the presence of Christ, a yielding to the greatness that He wants to achieve in you and for you, for the world, in ways that is perhaps different from what we had imagined before. We live the purpose and the meaning of our life so that Christ may be acknowledged everywhere. We live for His glory. According to Father Giussani, this is the foundation and the absolute value of every single person. Because the value of the individual does not rely in the mere participation to the flow of reality. We didn't make ourselves and we come to an end in this world. Man's greatness, he says in the Origin of the Christian Claim, and his freedom derive from a direct dependence on God. A condition by which man realizes and affirms himself. Dependence on God is the primary condition for what truly interests man. This is the paradox of our existence. This is the point where we find so much difficulty. That in these pages, Giussani affirms that my relationship with God is defined by that unique phenomenon which lies in the fact that the more deeply I abandon myself to Him, the more completely I let Him penetrate my being, the more powerfully he, the Creator, gains authority in me, the more I become myself. To depend, in this sense, is to belong, is to become free. This is the great paradox of our existence. Without this relationship, man as an individual cannot have a face of his own, could not be possibly be a person, a protagonist in the universal design, in the history of the world. It's almost second nature to understand this for us. We know that this is what has happened to us as we grew in age and maturity. Because without the love of another, our personality doesn't develop. It's as if without a relationship with another, without the capacity to be in relationship with another, we become almost like psychopaths, without a personality, without a capacity to be creative. Yet, at the same time, we perceive this great contradiction between belonging and freedom. This paradox is not new to us, it's quite old. We see its origin in Genesis. In Genesis 3, we read that in the day that you eat from this tree, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, but you will no longer need this relationship with him. Without belonging to him, without obeying to him, without yielding to his greatness. It's the first moment in this recorded history of the Bible in which we are witness to the rupture of the relationship with God. And this rupture in the relationship with him comes with great consequences. While we are free to define ourselves, free to give meaning to what we do, we choose to become the measure of everything, we suffer pain, we are accompanied by solitude. This is the mystery. Claiming the freedom to self-define, free to choose, to reshape everything at my will, I find myself at a loss, impotent. The German philosopher Fichte has this beautiful expression: to be free is nothing. To have the options, to have the possibility of doing what I want is nothing. To become free is heavenly. To become free is everything. But this becoming free, this experience of freedom, is what we lack, is what we cannot generate on our own. Often we think about freedom in the negative. We think about freedom in legal terms. But to have options does not entail fulfillment. Only thinking freedom in the positive, only thinking of freedom as this awakening, like an engine that roars, like into life, that brings the vitality. Like, think about how many times Father Carron continuously encourages us to remember this experience of freedom in the experience of being loved, in being chosen, the experience of a desire that is fulfilled. In Mark, we hear the words that Francis Xavier remembers of his first encounter with Ignatius. What profits to gain the whole world if you lose yourself? What profits you to actually have the capacity to choose whatever you want, to do as you please, to be the measure of your action and the measure of your goal and your fulfillment, if you, in the process of doing so, lose yourself? Those words resound strongly through the fabric of history. Because in claiming my independence, in claiming that I can define myself, I need to force myself to numb my deepest desires, my longings, to opt for something that is predictable, already defined, to opt for forms that are safe, and we naturally decay in formalism. Our discovery in life, our life's journey, is precisely this task of rediscovering, redefining what belonging is, so that it may become truer, so that it may become good, so that it become free. All through the work of Father Giussani, all through his words and through speeches, we can hear this resounding desire to continuously educate to this dependence. Because this unique relationship with God, insofar as is recognized and lived, is called religiosity. This education to dependence, this education to religiosity, is the main task of the life of the Church. To introduce one another, to educate into the life of God. Father Giussani states that Christian religiosity arises as the one and only condition to being human. In other words, that to be intensely human is to be religious. That to be fulfilled is the byproduct of my communing with, my belonging to, my being in relationship with the Father. Let's look at and try to, in a sense, purify the meaning of this word dependence, that for us, in our experience, is so often filled with formalism and externalism. Using the words of an Irish poet, John O'Donoghue, that speaks of belonging in these terms. Belonging is a circle that embraces everything. If we reject it, we damage our nature. When we deny it, we grow old, cold, and empty. The word belonging holds together the two fundamental aspects of life: being and longing. The longing of our being and the being of our longing. To belong is not something that we can create with our own action, with our own doing. It's of an ontological dimension. Is to be. We long to be. We long to be with the one who gives us being. So we read in the School of Community, everything in us screams and tends towards this being. As the poet says again, something in you knows, perhaps remembers that eternal belonging liberates longing into the surest and most potent creativity. This is why your longing is often wiser than your conventional sense of appropriateness, safety, and truth. We long for great things. Our desire invites us to leave these safe spaces and to throw ourselves into something other that at the same time is profoundly familiar. We long to be ourselves. We use this sentence all the time in many ways. We understand who a friend is to us precisely because it allows us to be. Yet, we easily get discouraged. We get lost, distracted. And O'Donoghue continues, months and years pass, and you fumble on, still incapable of finding a foothold on the path of time you walk. A large proportion of your activity distracts you from remembering. You mistake the insistent pressure of daily demands for reality, and your more delicate and intuitive nature wills. When you awake from your obsessions, you feel cheated. Your longing is being numbed, and your belonging becomes merely external. Your way of life has so little to do with what you feel and love in the world, but because of the many demands on you and responsibilities you have, you feel helpless to gather yourself. You are dragged in so many directions, away from true belonging. This is the dizzying human condition in which we find ourselves. We long for someone. The truest nature of our life, the truest nature of our person lies in our longing to be with another who makes me be, someone that yet we cannot reach, someone that we yet cannot build on our own. The journey is not something we can project ourselves. This dizzying human condition God answers to by involving himself with us. We read in the School of Community, the incarnation, the death and resurrection of Jesus is the most enlightening of the hypotheses, which gives unity to human history. He affirms his profound involvement with everything man might do. All things belong to him. I don't know how. Only the divine itself can, by becoming involved in my trials, by enlightening and sustaining me along the path. The mystery, by incarnating himself in a man, has penetrated the fabric of space and time to reach out to you and I, to speak to you and I in human terms. The mystery in doing so has altered the man-destiny relationship, says Don Giussani, which will no longer be based in human effort. This is the content of the Christian message. No longer a human effort to make oneself truly be what we are potentially, but the acknowledgement of a fact in history to which we can belong, relate to in human terms. The content of the next 2 months of the School of Community, the second part of this chapter of the divine in the church, we explore how this new being, this new humanity raises, takes hold of me. We heard the word osmosis. Giussani with this word highlights how the method is no longer a human effort. That is no longer my attempt to make myself be, but is the acknowledgement, is the acceptance, as we heard at the very beginning, the yielding to the greatness that another wants to achieve in me. in ways that perhaps are different from the ways in which we understood. We read in School of Community that the introduction into the life of God, into a more profound relationship with being that cannot be achieved by human effort, that cannot be achieved by human action, happens through osmosis. We read, those who adhere to this gratuitous initiative of God shall enter into a more profound relationship with being, to the extent that they become, as Paul says, part of Christ, members of his body. It is through osmosis that the mystery slowly seeps into our being. Don Giussani again says, anyone who lives the mystery of the ecclesial community receives a change in nature. We are, he continues, before the communication of the divine itself, of man's sharing God's life, the ontological density of which is only hinted at in the expression children of God. This is the heart of the Christian message. This is why we announce Jesus Christ as the new Adam, the healing of this rupture of the relationship between man and God. How this happens is a mystery to us. The mechanics of the divine communication remain mysterious, yet we can see the effects. Through grace, through the sacraments, by sharing in the life of the community, the I, my personality, my personhood is exalted. This new reality, this new being, this belonging is communicated through a person that shares life with an authentic ecclesial community, because it penetrates our entire fiber through the sacraments, the gestures that Christ is established. It's quite fascinating to hear, as you will read in the next few weeks, that the sacrament indicates man's ideal structure. It expresses this new humanity, but are not to be understood as some individualistic effort. Christian life, Don Giussani says, cannot ever be conceived as an individualistic relationship with Christ. It is a highly personal one, unfolding within the consciousness of fraternal relationship and within the bonds of personal responsibility toward the world. And here lies the difference between individualistic and personal. The dynamic of revelation ceases to emphasize ingenuousness and initiative, and stresses the simple recognition of a fact, of someone to follow, someone that is happening now that I long for, that I belong to. It stresses love and freedom over will. In the words of Father Giussani, love, in fact, represents man's only true dependence. The affirmation of the other as our very substance, the supreme choice of freedom. The saint is not the strong of will who chooses the right things to do at all times, but the one who adheres, who corresponds to God, the one who adheres to the gratuitous initiative of God. Only he who in freedom loves, chooses God, accepts what God creates in him, will enter into a more profound relationship with me, to this extent of becoming part of Christ. This transformation of our being, while not on our control, does not happen mechanically. It requires of our freedom. It only happens, as Don Giussani says, if man makes that act a conscious experience, by accepting its significance, by making room for it, and by allowing himself to be invested by it. As we continue in our work of School of Community, and we live at the same time the season of Lent, I encourage you to continue the work that I indicated before, the proposal of adhering to, of paying attention to these two aspects of singing and praying. Because it is through praying that we allow ourselves to be open to God. Often in our daily our Lenten observances, we tend to sacrifice the things that we love most. But at times, this sacrifice can be more an act of the will than an act of memory. I encourage you, as you think about your Lenten observances, to think of opportunities to increase this memory, to increase our awareness, to increase our longing to be with Him. Therefore, Lent, as Don Giussani says, is a privileged time to be with Him. It's a privileged time to be with friends that remind us of this longing for Him. It's a time to pray. It's a time to allow ourselves to expose ourselves to the power of God. Therefore, that our Lenten observance not be a sacrifice of our desire, but an increase of our longing. Often in these last few weeks, many people have expressed to me on one side the great discovery of those few minutes of praying the evening prayer and doing the School of Community. And at the same time, the difficulty to be faithful to this. Let's help and accompany one another in sustaining our desire. We may fall many times, and it is good for us to get over ourselves quickly. If we forget, let's ask for help to be reminded. If we fail, let's do it with somebody else. I encourage you to actually use this time of Lent to be with others, to be with your friends, to be with your family, to pray with your friends and with your family. And with this, I wish you a happy Lent.